players, we think about hardcore and casual. And I assume it's sort of a similar distinction here in Peru or much of South America. The hardcore players versus casual players, it's very binary. The reality is the audience is much more granular. This company, this research firm, proposes 6 sort of categories for players. There's many different ways to categorize them. These are their 6. I'm not saying these are the best 6. I just thought it was an interesting sort of breakdown. Here they have power gamer, which is probably similar to what we would normally refer to as hardcore gamer. The social gamer, the ones playing, Rock Band and multiplayer games and Farmville and so on. This one here, incidental gamer, is an interesting one. Incidental, it means like, you're not a gamer, but when you go to your friend's house and he or she has Rock Band and you kind of get, pushed into playing the drums because they need a drummer, you're sort of incidentally a gamer. You're playing, but not really because you're a gamer per se. But that's, they have it sort of calculated as about 12% of the market, where people are kind of just, playing because they're standing there almost. Then occasional gamers and so on. So again, I'm not suggesting this is the exact way to sort of, categorize the audience, but the reality is the audience is much more broad, much more diverse than just hardcore and casual. All right. Okay, so now we'll draw another graph to look a little bit, sort of from the marketplace point of view. Why is this happening? Okay, so this is time. And this one is dollars, and I've got them correct this time. So in most industries, with most products, most technologies and services, etc., market adoption follows a pretty standard process, and this should actually be pretty familiar to most of you. The idea of early adopters, then the followers, then sort of the mass market, and then market saturation. So the early adopters are the ones that are at midnight lined up outside the store to get the latest iPhone or whatever, iPad, that kind of stuff, or the latest console or gadget or whatever. So these are sort of the hardcore consumers, are the early adopters, and they're the ones willing to buy the stuff right away, and then followers, mass market, and then saturation. And this normally follows what's sort of been termed as an S curve. So over time. So over time, it sort of follows this S pattern where you have sort of, you have the early adopters, and then the followers come, then you kind of hit mass market, and then you hit saturation point. So sort of like an S. So in the beginning of a market, the revenue is relatively low, and then as you kind of grow, the revenue becomes higher. And generally speaking, there's something that's sort of driving demand along that curve. Something that drives demand, sort of consumption. So something like the iPhone means the idea of having that much music in your pocket. The sort of the switch from the either a CD player or even the early MP3 players, which were very sort of small and didn't really play that much music. This idea of having that much storage space, that much capacity in an iPod plus the iTunes store, was really the thing that was driving demand. So now, if I think about the traditional consoles, and I try to think about what's sort of driving demand along this curve of adoption and mass market saturation and so on, I'll sort of put forward the concept of horsepower, or sort of the raw power of the machines. So that's the CPU speed, the memory storage, the rendering, graphical rendering power, pixel throughput, all that hard drive space, all that kind of power, the horsepower of the machine. So I'll just sort of call that HP. Not the company, but horsepower. Since the beginning, many years ago, even early consoles, everything was sort of driven by this idea of making the machine stronger, faster, more powerful, etc. Sort of the green arrow, and that's what drove demand, along that arrow from early adoption to saturation. Now, invariably, what happens is, industry after industry, product after product, there's some disruptive innovation that occurs. There's some new demand factor. The marketplace perhaps has enough horsepower. They don't need more horsepower. They're interested in other things. And a new S commences. There's a new curve. And that new curve sort of starts, let's say over here, and sort of follows the same kind of path. And there's a new sort of driver of demand, which we don't particularly know what it is necessarily. So consumers have said, well, geez, we've hit sort of this saturation point. We've got all the horsepower that we need. We want something else. And I saw one of the girls pulled out she put it away, a netbook, right? The tiny little netbooks, right? I mean, the idea of the netbook is that you have enough power to do your email and sort of surf the web. It's more about portability. It's more about battery duration. So it's other factors that are driving demand, not the power of the machine, which is, in my laptop and other laptops has usually been sort of the driving factor. So in that case, you kind of jump off of this trajectory, and you kind of go you go on to the other one because you've saturated your horsepower needs. And so this, in large part, is what we're seeing with the rapid adoption. Okay. All right. I'll try not to do that again. This is kind of what we're seeing with the adoption of the Wii. Right, the Wii is not particularly powerful in terms of the horsepower of the machine, and some developers joke that the Wii was 2 GameCubes duct taped together in terms of processing power, and yet it's like kicking ass, right? It's beating the other consoles. Why? Because